What's really fascinating about a digital world is that you can connect from anywhere in the world. But a lot of the world is being massively persecuted for being a Christian. And so they can connect and hear the gospel with no real risk because all their IP is going to show is that they were connected to a gaming website called Rec Room. And so that there's no digital log or proof that they were hearing the gospel of God. I think that digital universes are going to be a massive front for the church.
What's going on? This is Brett Snodgrass with another episode of the Iron Deep podcast, and I got Christopher Adams on the show with me today. What's going on, Christopher?
Hey, everyone.
What's going on, man? Hey, guys, we got a great show for you guys today, and this is a little bit of a different show that we haven't had much action on. I mean, typically we're talking about business or entrepreneurship or men of faith, and this is all really encompasses all of that, but we're going to more of the digital world. And Christopher Adams is the president and co-founder of Lands of Elohim, which we're going to dive into is a digital metaverse that really, that I know that I don't have a lot of background in. Maybe some of you guys don't have a lot of background in, but this is really, really important. Christopher came to our event a few weeks ago and really pointed out the importance of why we should pay attention for the future generations. That this is going to be so important and how to impact for the kingdom of God in this particular way, that this is the direction that we're going to be going 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years for generations to come. So I'm super excited to welcome you to the show, Christopher. Thanks again for having
Thank
me
you.
or being on the show. But I want to just tell us a little bit about you, Christopher Adams. Where'd you come from? I know you're a young whippersnapper, and you're creating this metaverse. But tell us a little bit about Christopher.
Yeah, so 27 years old, born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. Been an entrepreneur for as I would say about 14 years old. Since about 14 years old, I was trying bakeries and like the bake shows at church and like anything I could do to make money. Always had that kind of grind in me. And then for me, a really important part of my story is I had a really rough upbringing. And because I had a really rough upbringing, video games were my outlet.
Mm.
They were kind of my escape, and I saw like even one of your questions, like escapism, right? Like I think there's a lot of people that use video games as that, but that was a really important outlet for me personally, was like escaping all of the trauma and the chaos that was in my childhood. And so video games were my natural outlet. And so I just fell in love with video games, fell in love with these virtual worlds that we could, be inside of and interact with people and build cool things. And so that paired with my entrepreneurial prowess is really what brought me into creating Lands Elohim.
That's awesome. I got a few questions on that, just to kind of dig into your more of your personal life. So you
Yeah.
got into baking. What do you
All
bake?
sorts of everything.
Do you
Yeah.
bake anything today? What's like something you bake?
Yeah, no. So like my family, we're huge cooks. Like you should see our Thanksgiving every year. We got Thanksgiving flying up right now, and we'll bake biscuits and gravy for breakfast, and we'll do like all sorts of like pastries and like everything you can think of. And our spread is literally massive all the way across the entire kitchen for food. And so cooking in general in my family is just something that's really important. And so like something I cook today, I'm a big cookie person. That's like one of my diet kryptonites is
Right.
cookies and ice cream. So
Do you
yeah,
bake?
that's,
Do you like kind of bake from scratch? Does your family bake
oh
from?
yeah.
Yes.
Oh
So
yeah.
you don't
Oh
get
yeah.
the
Always.
out of the bag or nothing.
No, if you whip out a box anything in my family, they're like, what are you doing? Like you can go find a really good recipe anywhere online, or
Yeah.
my grandma has a whole pantry tree full of cookbooks that we normally pull from too.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then you talked about video games that you used video games and you fell in love with video games. And this is something that, especially as young boys, that I have two young boys and we're constantly talking about video games and help, are they helpful, are they harmful? And there's always this, I think, from my generation to even your generation to the younger generations, there's this tension with video games. And so I want to dig into that a little bit, but before we get in, let's just have some fun with it. Like, video games for you, like, what was one of your favorite games that you like really fell in love with in your virtual world?
Yeah. So mine was Eve Online. And it is basically World of Warcraft in space is the simple way I like to put it, because it wasn't a super popular game, but essentially short and sweet, it was a space universe where every single action that you took could be felt by all other players.
Mm,
And it was unlike a lot of other games, which are like a bunch of different servers where your server is kind of like based on your region. This was just one server. So
mm.
everyone knew everybody. You could really make an impact. And I was able to really make an impact in that game. And so it was fun to be young and be escaping the childhood I was escaping and making an impact all at the same time.
Wow, interesting. So was that kind of like a smaller game? Because I've never heard of that game. Was it, you know, uh, just since you knew everybody, was it just kind of a smaller community?
Yeah, a few 100,000 active people every month, and sometimes on our higher months we get into a few million. But yeah, in comparison to like huge video games, like the Xbox network has 200 million people every month. The PlayStation network has 150 million. Roblox has 350 million. Right? To be at a few million, you're in a drastically different category.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's just kind of, thanks for sharing that. But let's talk about this. What the question I just kind of phrased was, again, my generation versus even the younger generation. And I
Yeah.
liked video games, to a point. I think we had Atari. I think for first,
Mhm.
that was mine, and Nintendo started to become pretty big when I was a kid. I think PlayStation, the first PlayStation maybe had come out. I think when I was in college, the second PlayStation came out. Um, so I got into video games, but I wasn't like, crazy into them. I like to play them, and I would get into a game and get hooked a little bit. But then after it was over, I wasn't so much into it. But again, for my generation, there's this tension where video games, even today, like, helpful, harmful. Um, I don't know. In my mind, like, it's just my boy. I watch my boys get sucked into video games, and sometimes in my mind, I'm like, is that harmful to them to be into that? And I want you to just talk about your world, and you're really into the video games, and you're seeing it from your perspective and generation, and even generations to come. Can you talk about this tension a little bit
Sure.
of that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Brett. And I think it's a question that I've been asked, especially since of what we're producing. So 2 points that I think I should touch on is one is that the world that we are stepping into is drastically more digital than the world that we're leaving. And day by day, new inventions are being put out. Day by day, AI is getting stronger. Day by day, these worlds that people like myself are creating are coming more and more real. And so when we were all younger, myself included, the video games were very distinctly different from reality,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And you'd play your DS, or you'd play your Atari, you'd play your GameCube, whatever, and it's like, okay, wait, those graphics are horrible. It's
Hmm.
very clear that they're not reality. But the world that we're stepping into is that is no longer going to be the case, and reality is going to merge um, with these virtual worlds that we're creating. But a question I a question I always like to ask, and it's always kind of in a fun way, that's you're not really supposed to answer it, is, okay, well, are you on your phone all the time? Could you live without your phone? And almost everybody, if you say no, you're lying, right? Like,
Hmm.
you can't operate without your phone.
Hmm.
Right? So then what is that? That's an extension of yourself, right?
Hmm.
It's an extension of yourself to access the world digitally,
Hmm.
right? And that's what's coming. Now, a lot of people can say that that's scary, or that's a little dystopian, which in a certain capacity it is. But what if we had Christians building in the space that's already going that way? What if we had Christians that said, we want to uplift people instead of enslave people into these social media vortexes, and addict people with these experiences and just get their money, right?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that that's the stark contrast, right? Because again, connecting these points, the world is getting more digital. The world that we left with the video games being very fake and very distinctly different is leaving us, and we are going to spend more and more time online. And so why not, as Christians, why not stop putting our head in the sand when technology and innovation's coming, and let's start building and embracing what's coming so that we can influence the next generation. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of, again, connecting a few of your questions and a few of your points. That's kind of what comes to my mind and comes to my heart.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, and I love, I think when you think about it like that, it's just so super important. Like for me, like you would ask that question, can you live without your phone? And I would say yes, because maybe I came from the world with no phone, but I would also say, but maybe not, because it would be make my life extremely difficult, right?
Yep.
Extremely difficult. So, um, and you're right. I mean, I started even thinking about my own life, about what do I do in the digital world. Like for example, I don't go grocery shopping as much anymore. I
Yeah.
just do it digitally. I don't have to maybe go through the drive-through that much anymore, because I might order it digitally. Someone
Yep.
shows up at my house with the food. And it could be countless other things. Communication is all digitally these days. So I want to talk about just this. You're creating this virtual world, and it's lands of Elohim, and you
Yep.
kind of spoke on a little bit, but this is really an advancing of the kingdom of God in
Mhm.
a digital space. Why? We have churches, right? We go to church. There's a lot of people are worshiping physically together. I think so in my mind, it's important to for people to be physically together. Um, but why this, like, can you talk to us about this? Like, why is it so important that Christians and followers of Christ really start to enter into this digital space? I think you hit on a little bit, but can you talk about just a little bit about lands of Elohim? What is it, and why is it so important?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think there's a couple context things to go over quickly before we dive into Lands Elohim, and it's to make sure people truly understand the gravity of what's coming. And I think there's a lot of people, especially if you're not in technology, if you're not really in these virtual worlds, you might just think it's some far off problem that's not present. And so a statistic I really like to throw out at people, and I said this at the Iron Deep, is that right now, actively, like if you're listening, and this is probably going to be a new statistic to you, right now, actively, there is 500 million people every single month that in some way, shape, or form are interacting in a digital world. 500 million. That's more than the population, almost double the population of the entire United States.
Hmm.
And it's not slowing down. In fact, by 2030 into the next decade, the estimations are that it's going to be over 3 billion people, right? And so you're talking about like 40-45% of the planet is going to be interacting in digital worlds, right? And so when we start talking about why is it important for us to start getting involved and getting active in this realm, is it's because it is going to be the largest frontier ever created in humanity,
Mm.
period. And when you look at the internet, and you look at the internet in a capacity of the world and the technologies that we're building right now, it's going to be the frontier that is going to give the largest harvest field ever, right? When we think about humanity as a harvest field, which Jesus often tells us to look at it as, right, is because it is, right, it is his harvest field.
Hmm.
And the sheer amount of and here's the gravity, the sheer amount of content and um, sheer amount of things that are being thrown at our children right now is overwhelming. Pornography is rampant, right? Horrible content that is just horrible in their brains, that is pulling them towards hell, is overwhelming on these platforms, right? And when you start, and then again connecting dots, then when you start looking at, okay, wait, 500 million people are involved in virtual worlds. Content is rampant that's not supposed to be there. And then these virtual worlds are getting more and more digital and immersive. How do you think that that's going to connect? It's going to make these virtual worlds extremely addicting. It's going to make these virtual worlds so fun, quote unquote, fun to be in, because then they're going to be able to immerse themselves in these experiences that they were once just watching,
Mhm.
right? Now they can experience it themselves, right?
Mhm.
And so, again, with that context, I always like to frame it a little bit to make sure people understand the gravity. Our universe that we're building is on the exact stark opposite. It is a virtual world that is uplifting and inspiring. It is a world that will, in every single undertone and mission and thing that you can do in our universe, is teaching you about the wages of sin and that lead to death. It is, instead of just throwing a Bible at you, it is saying, hey, how about you come learn about our creator? How about you come learn about the person that saved you? And it's done in this story somatic way. My grandfather, who's a pastor, who is an advisor to us at Lands Elohim, he he and I often talk about this, and it's, what's Hollywood done right? That we can all argue that they've done a lot of things wrong, and they have, but what's the thing that they've done right? They have made movies extremely immersive to watch, and it's fun, and you like it, and it's these awesome worlds, and they have these huge budgets. Why don't we start doing that as
Mhm.
Christians? And
Mhm.
we have started, and I've been really impressed with some of the recent Christian movies that have been coming out. But that's another approach that we're taking as well. Is our approach is doing all of those inspiring, missional, Jesus centered things in the highest fashion that we can.
Mhm.
And so I think that's some good context.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And I wanted and I just want to add to all that, and because I think what you're saying is, I grew up where the TV, right? People would watch hours and hours and hours of
Mhm.
TV. Like that was the big problem. That was the big thing. People would just get immersed in their TVs, right? And then video games, like my world of types of video games where you would play, but the graphics weren't that good, and you knew it was
Yeah,
a game, and you didn't have the feelings of I'm in the game, right?
yeah,
And then now we're entering into the new era where instead of watching the television and watching the game, you can be a part of the game.
exactly.
And I think you mentioned there was a movie that have come out that I think I don't know how many years ago, but it was it Player One, that was kind of like
Ready Player One.
Ready
Yep.
Player One, that was kind
Yep.
of a simulation. I don't think I've ever seen that movie, but that might be can you talk to us about that? Like that might be a good
Yeah.
point, just as someone to watch. So it's like,
Yes.
now we're a part of the game, because
Yes.
an example is my son. Um, he loves to play. I think you mentioned Minecraft a little bit. He
Mhm.
is really obsessed, starting to be obsessed with Minecraft. And like I watch it, but I don't really quite understand it, because it's kind of slow. And I'm like, it's not like the normal games where it's just, I'm on cocaine, right? It's just kind of slow, and I'm like, but I think it's just because he's part of the game, and he can interact and he can create things. But okay, but back up to the Player One. Can you talk to us about that and a little bit more of just being part of the game?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, if you're listening and you have not seen Ready Player One, and you want to truly understand what we're going into, I think that movie has done the best. In fact, in all of us that are building metaverses, that's always our go-to. Like,
Mm.
hey, if you haven't seen this, go watch it. You'll understand more. You'll understand a little bit more about what we're building, and why we're building it. Yeah, I think that's a great movie.
Yeah, awesome. So can you talk about what other people are building? So again, you're talking about this really safe, metaverse, this digital space environment that we can go into. Maybe we can even, think about our kids can get into and to be safe. Because I know as a parent, like I'm always afraid, like even movies or shows
Mhm.
or whatever these days, it doesn't matter if it's a cartoon. Even like you used to be like, oh yeah, it's a cartoon, it's fine, no big deal. But now you're always like, I wonder if it has a
What's in
hidden
it? Yeah.
message in it, and all
Yep.
that, what's hidden behind the doors. So can you talk to us about what are other people building at the same time? Because I think there's a lot of universes being built right now, correct?
Yeah. There are. Yeah. And I think one thing, as you were talking, one thing I'd love to read is a short definition that we've really latched onto of what the metaverse is. And then secondly, to then answer your question about what other people are building. So a metaverse is more than just a virtual world. It's a vast immersive space where people from all walks of life can interact, play games, explore, and even conduct business using digital avatars. The digital frontier fosters socialization and creativity within a shared universe, teeming with endless possibilities, seamlessly blending the real and digital worlds. Right, and so that's really a definition that we've latched onto. And so then, with that in context of what everybody else is building, everybody else is really building things to get user hours. That's one of our big metrics, is how many hours are people spending in your world,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
The greater the amount of hours, the more money that you can get from them,
So
right?
what's for
And
sale?
that's
I always think of like what's for sale
yeah,
is your attention.
bingo.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the longer you can get someone to stay in your universe, normally the more money you can raise, normally the more money in general your universe is going to be worth, right? And so that's one of the key metrics that they're focused on. They don't really care about what's in your universe as long as you're getting more hours. Which
Mhm.
if you pull that thread, that's a very dangerous thread to go down, because then they're going to just introduce things into their universe that is going to hook you, right? And so I wouldn't classify all of my colleagues that are building like that way, but I do imagine that it's going to get dangerously that way, especially as the money really starts to flow into our space. Right now, to a statistic to kind of add more gravity to what we're talking about here, is that the estimations are putting the metaverse space worth over $5 trillion by the middle of next decade,
Mm,
right? So about 10 years from right now, the metaverse space is going to be worth about 5 trillion,
wow.
right? Which is
It's
a
quite a
massive,
bit.
it's a massive amount of money.
Yeah.
And so they're all going to be chomping at the bit to get their valuations and their chunk of that 5 trillion. And if that means that they have to add pornography, or if they have to add the horrible things that people are going to want to be involved in, then they're going to add it,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Yeah. And when you mean by that, like again, and it's just like again, I think just going back to how do we enter into a safe world? How do we keep
Mhm.
ourselves safe? How do we keep our own minds
Yep.
safe? Right? The Bible talks about just renewing our minds and what are we putting into our minds. And we've been talking about music. I mean, parents always talk about like the music that we listen to or kids listen to, the movies that what are we putting into our minds? And this is just this is just the next level. But it's so much more, I think, dangerous again because you're in. I don't even know. Like all that stuff brings feelings and it brings emotions and things like that. But this is just you think it's real. I think right at the end of the day.
Hmm.
So I think it's more dangerous for that.
You think it's real, you latch onto it, you start to love it, and loving something fake is extremely dangerous for the heart.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, how do you us talk about lands of Elohim then? So you're building out this virtual world that is safe, that is going to be, has a foundation of the kingdom of God. How do you envision people engaging with this lands of Elohim? Um, how does it all work? I know it's going to be coming out here in the next couple of months, just kind of a trial run. But how do people use this experience?
Yeah, so it at first it's going to be very similar to a game, and you'll be able to download it onto your computer. We'll launch as a computer application, and eventually our goal is to get into tablets and phones, but that's very far away because the computing power of phones and tablets is very low in comparison to computers, and that's how you're going to interact as a computer.
Hmm.
Now, something to add context, what we're launching in next month is our first backing to back the universe, and that's coming up mid next month, which we will need everybody's support. So if you're feeling your heart pulled by this message, feel free to support us. But as far as the direction of it, I think you can really expect us to be in the market and active and building out with the rest of the market sometime towards the end of 2026, beginning of 2027.
Okay.
The sheer amount of money and manpower that has to be built into this thing to do it right, and I think to tie a couple of your questions previously as well, there are a lot of people that are taking the mindset of, okay, well, we're just going to launch and we'll figure out how it works.
Hmm.
And we've done the opposite. My co-founder and I are both very immersed in the space. I've been in Web3, which is what the classification of what this internet technologies are is Web3, this new version of the internet for over 7 years now, and my co-founder as well. And we have taken all the experience we have and his background and my background combined to build our universe the right way, so that when we launch, that it captivates the market instead of repulses the market. Because there's a lot of metaverses that are launching that are saying we'll just get better later,
Hmm.
but then they lose that brand awareness because everybody just writes them off because the very first impression that they see of their brand is subpar.
Hmm.
And so that's what we've been really focused on, is building out our brand the right way to then get people to adopt us. So again, you guys can back us as first backers. We're giving out founders chests to the people that first back us. That will give huge rewards into the future, and then expect to really see us interactive in the market in 2026, 2027.
Awesome. Can you explain like what's a founder's chess?
Yeah. So a founder's chest is a chest that will give essentially lifetime rewards. So as long as you own the chest, because you were our first backers, you will get rewards permanently. So every expansion that we have into our universe, every new world, every new drop, every new season, you will get a reward because we want to reward the very first people that believed in us.
Hmm.
And so there won't be likely, there's very few digital assets that we're ever going to launch in our entire universe that will even come remotely close to the value that we're going to drive to the people that first believed in us.
Awesome. Awesome. What do you hope that people come away? So after they're in, they're part of Lands of Elohim, and
Yep.
they're interacting in their virtual world. What do you hope that they come away with? And some some things that I think about, like for example, Facebook, right? So that's a world that my generation's been a part of, but I know it's a lot of us are kind of dropping off of Facebook, because when we engage with Facebook and after we walk away from it, we don't feel great, right? We feel maybe less than or something. I'm not sure, but a lot of my friends are starting to walk away because of those types of feelings. What's your hope with people that are engaging with Lands of Elohim and that just are part of that world? Yeah, and how do you? So to answer that one first, I guess.
Uplifted and inspired, walking away with seeds from God, right? That then the Holy Spirit can then do his work with, and then just excited that they just had a fun experience. I would say those three things.
Mhm. Awesome. And then you mentioned that a lot of people really, the what's for sale is the attention and just
Mhm.
hours of time on that. That is what increases the value, which again, certain games, not saying that this one, but certain games, the more you're on it, the more harmful it can do to our
Yeah.
brains, I think, at the end of the day, right? So what do you guys, what's your some of your metrics that you're going for?
Of course, we'll because we'll be raising money. Hours are going to be one of the key metrics as well. But another metric is conversions. We want our digital universe to be one of the largest outreach and church building, kingdom building programs in the world. But again, we're doing that not with us preaching the gospel. We want to be a conduit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our company's goal is not, we are not a Christian company per se.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really label yourself as that and really accomplish the mission that we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we are going to be is we're going to be a huge conduit.
Mm-hmm.
Digital churches building in our universe, people coming in and really preaching the gospel. None of that will be outlawed ever. Period. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, exactly the opposite, right? Um, and so that's one of our other key metrics. So, of course, hours, because that's going to be a standard across the space. Amount of users, of course, all of those standard ones. But I would also say how many people is our universe saving?
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. So I think again, just kind of picturing out years down the road, just digital churches, right? And you think that
Yeah.
that will be something. I mean, I know that church has changed even a lot. That a lot of people are doing it online these days. But you think that that could even be instead of actually going to church, people are just going to the digital church.
Well, it's already happening. So I'm connected with a lot of organizations now just because of what we've been building. And some of them are seeing in Rec Room, which is a form of an early metaverse. Um, they're seeing somewhere between 15 and 20 people saved every single time that they host a church service on Sundays.
Mm,
And what's really fascinating about a digital world is that you can connect from anywhere in the world. And so a lot of the world is being persecuted. We're really saved from this in the United States, but a lot of the world is being massively persecuted for being a Christian.
it's
And
true.
so they can connect and hear the gospel with no real risk because all their IP is going to show is that they were connected to a gaming website called Rec Room, right?
Mm,
And so that there's no digital log or proof that they were hearing the gospel of God,
wow,
right?
that's interesting.
And and so people from China and all these other various different regions over in Asia and in the Middle East specifically that are being persecuted for hearing the gospel, where if they were to get caught in a church, they would either get killed or sent to prison. They're able to connect and hear the gospel and connect with other Christians. And so, especially as the world consistently keeps getting more, turmoil and the chaos starts to come in, I think that digital universes are going to be a massive front for the church. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I actually just have a friend. He just moved to Indiana from India. He lived in India for 16 years. He married a woman from India, and her dad was planting churches, but they were getting extremely persecuted, and they had to move out of the
Yeah.
country for
Yep.
that. So that's yeah, it's a real thing. I know we don't struggle maybe with that in the United States, but in many other parts of the
Mhm.
world they do. So um, before we wrap up this show, what do so we talked about just Lands of Elohim a little bit, but can you talk to us about like what do you do? What do you do in there? I mean, a virtual world. People are interacting and things like that, but like what's some of the common activities that people do in the Lands of Elohim or in a metaverse? Like, what are some of you know the common things?
Yes, that's a great question. So we will have a series of various different gaming experiences. We're calling them experiences because they're more than just video games. But that's if you take that outside of it, you'll be able to connect and watch movies with friends. You'll be able to socialize and do various different types of quests together where you can roam around and do almost like treasure hunts. You'll be able to conduct business. You'll be able to do e-commerce and shop for things. You'll be able to find the latest trends in all things commerce in general. Um, Anything that you can basically do in the real life, you'll be able to do it in a digital life with anyone on the planet.
Mm,
And so that's really where it's going. And worship, like we were just talking about, worshiping God and connecting to hear preachers that you may never have wanted to hear, right? Or never, not necessarily wanted, but never could have heard because you've been geographically locked into your local region, right?
mm,
To give you just an example, we're talking with some Nigerian people because I truly believe that Nigeria is going to be one of the hugest markets in the world in the coming decade. And like I've been able to hear them and the way that they speak with such raw power,
mm-hmm,
right? It's raw power. Once you can get past the accent, because we're different accents in our region of the world, the Holy Spirit is speaking through them.
Hmm.
And it's like, why not, if you don't have a local church that you're really grounded to, why not hear out some other people that are pastors that are preaching, right?
Yeah.
And so that just, again, anything that you can basically do in the real life, minus eating and a few of the other things that are obviously focused on our body, you will be able to do in the digital world.
Yeah. No, it's really, really interesting. And so, for example, like at our last Iron Deep, I got a friend named Pablo that lives in Guatemala, and I want to
Yeah.
hang out with him sometimes, but it's difficult. And I can call him, we can chat, or we could do a Zoom call. But it would be, I think, just a more just intimate type of experience, just to be with him if it was in that setting, like with our avatars. So
Yep.
that'd be awesome.
Yep.
That'd be cool. That's awesome. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, man. I want to give you an opportunity if someone's interested. I know you got a backing coming up, and just
Yep.
really, really interested in this. How can someone find out more information about Lands of Elohim? How can we help support you?
Yeah. So please reach out to my email, Christopher at lanzaelohim.com. If you need the direct email, Brett, I'm sure can give it to you, but it's exactly how it sounds. Christopher, normal spelling, at Lands of Elohim. LinkedIn as well. So either one, feel free to reach out, connect with me. If you know someone that would benefit from our mission, if you know someone that could, you know, be aligned with where we're going. I think something else that's also really fun to do is raise from like-minded people. Is we're looking to hire a few key people right now,
Mm,
a chief technology officer and a chief branding officer. So if this type of mission not only excites you, but you're like, whoa, that's like the coolest thing in the world, and you have those skill sets to be a true add to the team, we're looking for that actively right now.
awesome.
So I think between the raise and the key hires, those are some of the key things we need right now.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, we're here to support you, man. Any way we can do. We're going to put that in our show notes too, guys. So make sure you check out our YouTube channel, our Iron Deep YouTube channel. We're going to put that all in our show notes. So thank you so much. And Christopher, this is a wrap, man. Thanks for so much for being on the Iron Deep podcast today.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.